think we're about to be live. Cool. Excuse me. Oh, and then let me pull up this. Oh. How long has it been like a month since my last stream. I'm rusty.
It's been a month?
Yeah.
How often were you streaming? It's pretty good.
All right. I just want to hear people be like, "Whoa, we can't hear you, Joey." But I think we're fine. I see that wiggling. So let's go. I'm just a normal guy.
Yeah, let's keep it chill.
Trying to keep it too try hard.
Battle raged.
Hey, what up?
The first tournament. The forces of
My coworker. What's up, Daniel? SEO. You know, man. I might rely on you to give me some feedback if things aren't quiet. This is my first. Turns out that these aren't really ideal. I guess we could try and just yell at each other. What? I can't hear you. Leonardo 10 Inchy. What up, Paul? New streamer? No, this is my buddy Chaz. He directed that Casey Jones short film I worked on, and this is his idea.
We've been talking about playing Mortal Kombat.
Is that Chaz? This is Chaz.
It's
Fucking
me.
go! It's Chaz. Chaz, you legend. You already have fans, Chaz.
Stop.
Fuck.
No. Oh, God.
That's funny. Alright, so we might have to switch to the emulator.
It's 2005 all over.
Like your cap?
Oh
yeah, this is a good one.
I decided to go all in on the theme today.
Yeah. That's funny, actually. Is that the Chaz? Yeah, that's him. Oh, damn it.
Chaz.
Alright, so... we might have to switch to PCSX2. I did look at the disc. It is a little scratched. That's just the nature of getting pre-owned, you know?
Third.
Look! You're just waiting for the stream to end to have a makeup session. You know that! You know that! Also, what up, Sleepy? Do I know you? Hold on, let's damn it.
We're gonna have to.
So yeah, I was playing on like a real PS2, but you know, it might not let us. Damn it.
Bummer.
I mean, it only took us half an hour to get this set up. What's another 20 minutes?
Hold, please.
Damn it. All right. The technical issues.
Reconfigure.
And we switched to that scene easier.
No.
Do you? I don't know. Change your name again? Is this Barrett again? What? Okay. Oh, is that Ken? Did you get banned again? First, what, Frenchie? So, yeah, Shaolin Monks froze. Sorry, guys. We're going to switch to the emulator. Bear with me. That sucks. A lot. Can you just hold that green button for me?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I'll get some controllers.
Oh, my God.
Oh my God. So this will work. I just need a USB, and then Xbox One will work.
Nice.
Guys, entertain the people.
It was worth a shot.
It was worth trying. Honestly, I didn't tested this.
The concept was solid,
I
but
swear I didn't work.
I'm upset.
Louder! Oh yeah, same.
I'm upset. I'm upset.
Thank you for the redeem. I'm getting controllers. We'll fix it.
hurry, Joey. The people are waiting. Did you? When was the last time you played this game? This actual copy, or?
I feel like it was this copy. I was trying to break it again. Is that Jay? Oh, that's Paul. He knows what he's doing. Here, Paul. Yeah.
I'm retarded.
It's the, sorry guys. Hit me.
the game on.
Yeah, I downloaded it. I'll just get it hooked up. Yeah, he broke it. Fucker. Is
Joey, the setup looks legit.
thank you. Who said that? Oh, what? Thank you, Daniel. Properties, fresh cash, and remember, accept a privilege. I will turn that shit off. Sorry.
We'll get there.
Ignore this mess.
Everyone just watching on stream dig through your entire entertainment center.
Right? Like my plethora of 6 generations of consoles.
Don't mind the stuffed animals.
The dildos.
Oh no.
Buffet of fleshlights. Oh!
That forward trip. How could you forget?
Oh, thank you for the biddies. Thank you for the cheers, man. A whole $1. I'm gonna throw my PS2 away.
No.
I fucking love that thing. It's the disc.
Is it? Can I take it out? Let's see.
Yeah, sure. Oh, we can turn it back on.
How bad is it?
It was pretty bad when I looked at it. I could probably buff it out.
Oh, there's a couple. There's some solid ones on there.
Not great. Oh, that's funny.
bad.
Turn it back on, yeah. Alright, so Poke Catch. What up, Ken? What up, Paul? What up, Daniel? What else? What up, Frenchie?
Oh, you got this from Retro City?
Yeah, I think that was like their first location too.
Nice. No.
Yep. Ah! Everything's ruined.
You bought this a decade ago?
Was that what it said?
Yeah, that's what the receipt says.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, I have like a weird habit of like just keeping my receipts for games like in the bag, so I can be like, when did I buy it?
A little member berry.
Yeah. I'd be remembering.
Here, do you need the rat's nest? That's
That's funny. Fucking forgot about that. Thank you. He's redeeming. You're spending money for that. Thank you. I don't deserve it, but I'll take it.
we're gonna live stream 3 hours of us untangling headphones.
For real, dude. For real.
Someone's fetish.
Oh, I think minimizing that will still that work. I'm gonna turn off and launch PCSX2, which is right here. Actually, let me get my game. I downloaded it just in case.
Stupid bitch, you fucking slut!
Nice.
Did you fuck with me?
He's going ham. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. These 2 games. My Shaolin monks. My 100% legally obtained.
I mean, you do own the copy, so
I do own a copy, so it's less bad.
fair.
Yeah. What up, Jay? How you doing? Turns out my PS2 game is scratched and I won't play. My fucking audio was... Oh, was that too loud? Sorry. First. He's first. Alright, and I'll be up and running. I promise. Available. We'll skip for now. I don't feel like... Later. Settings. I should have done this forever ago. Controllers. 1. Controller. Not connected.
You're having to map everything out.
Yeah, I'm pretty good at it. A fist fight on stream.
I'll be Liu Kang.
I think that was it. Oh, I mean, it detects a controller. There's an automatic mapping. Oh, this should be player 2. And got this. Sorry, everybody. Build character, okay? So game capture. Where's the deal with Chaz? Property.
Well, you usually don't stream off of the hardware, though, right?
Sometimes.
You do? Okay.
And it's fucking behaving. You press X?
Shut up, bitch!
Oh, yeah, maybe it is.
Are you in control?
It's me. But it,
Oh,
yeah. I mean, this does look cleaner than the PS2
that's
version.
fucking flickering.
Yeah.
That's worked. Right. Here we go. Things. I really should have got this running sooner.
We had faith in the PlayStation.
I did.
Failed us.
We're all counting on you. Alright, we'll try to. What about the other one? Oh. You know the type of shit? Stream is so shoddy, unfollowed. Thank you. That's our J. Question Nick. Oh shit. It's all good. Thank you, man. Thank you for the gift sub. This is probably my most unprofessional stream yet.
It's because of me, isn't it?
You cursed it.
I brought the bad juju on stream.
Alright, settings.
We'll go back home, it's
controllers.
fine.
No!
I'll have to solo Shaolin monks.
No! Oh, it crashed.
The emulator.
That is kind of funny, actually.
Bro.
Alright. Maybe I should update it.
Are you sure you don't want to update?
It worked before. Damn it. Alright. Automatic mapping. Google Stadia controller. That's what this is. It is plugged in. I know, right? They've seen it. They've seen me do it here before. I know. We've been at this for an hour. Not here, but like setting everything up. You know?
Dialing it in.
Yeah. Sorry, Chaz.
Well, I mean, it's a new setup though too. You
Yeah,
with all the
everything off and
camera, lights.
these lights. All right, so Stadia. That should fucking work. Yours was working. What was yours working, huh? Things, controllers, and then port 2 to the Xbox One. How's your sugar?
Oh, I'm good.
Oh. Quality, the pixels. Oh, the fuck, Wild Chaz. Hey, it's Frank.
No.
What up, bloody?
What's up?
Oh my god. Alright, hopefully this fucking works this time. Alright, Mortal Kombat, Shaolin Monks. Upset. I'm upset. Oh, that worked.
Ren.
Watch it not work.
Don't curse it, Joey.
Would be a little funny.
Told you you're gonna have to solo this game.
You just He's hanging out.
I'm spectator in the back.
Here we go. You're. Oh, thank God!
It's happening.
Finally.
Okay, I will be.
You said Lou.
I'll be Lou.
Or who did you said? That's what you said, right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Kung Lao,
Wow.
Liu Kang.
No, we don't touch anything.
It's working. Just let it happen.
Here we go. Make it move. There we go. There we go. Normal.
We're in.
We're in. Watch this freeze.
The
Crash.
Earth realm were facing their greatest challenge.
Helldivers win. Oh, dude, soon.
Helldivers win.
Yeah, I got my high school best friend is in it. I got my niece to play. Game frozen? No, game's not frozen. Oh. You don't say that.
Far so good.
I'm gonna dive into these nuts. Nice. How you doing? How you doing, bloody? Did you know this is a reference to the head eat fatality that Reptile has?
Probably my least favorite reptile.
Yeah, dude, I might be in the minority, but I hated when they started making him look like a reptile. I just like the green ninja.
Yeah.
Johnny, no, he's fine. Game is too violent, mom won't let me watch anymore. Well, I'll distract your mom with my sexy good looks, and then you're free to play. Dude, I want an introduction like that. Like, I show up to work, Joey. Joey. Wings. Oh, thank you for the cheers, man. This is getting me hyped for the Street Fighter movie. Dude, I really want to see that movie. That looks a lot of fun.
I think it'll be good. Have faith.
I don't want to go there, but it looks like even if it's bad, it looks like it'll just like look cool.
Yeah.
Now we're doing all this stupid shit.
I think the soundtrack will probably be good too.
Yeah. When was the last time you played this?
2005 in a gamer rocking chair in front of my CRT TV.
Oh, those ones are like on the floor?
Yeah.
That one was?
Yeah, dude.
Like
Me and
Cosmo
me and my cousin both had those.
Oh, RJ?
RJ has the good little like leather foamy rocker ones.
Why didn't Shang Tsung just morph into Sydney Sweeney and just make all of them cream their pants? Sydney Sweeney has no ass. I've looked. I've crunched the numbers. She has great genes. Not well rounded at all, but you need the whole package. Looks like she has an ass. Start playing like the fucking Incredibles mystery music, and I'm just looking at the photos of her, trying to get the right angle so I can see her ass. I'll just watch Euphoria after this.
Girl's pretty nasty.
Yeah.
You fight him in this, don't you?
I think so. I think he gets resurrected, because this is the ending of MK1 right now. But Shaolin Monks is a retelling of 2. Wait, no. Well, I guess Thor was defeated? Yeah, I thought he was killed.
Destroying the island. Get out. We must return.
I don't need like huge fake asses. Probably not easy for her. Just do squats. Oh, probably not easy for her. Oh yeah, dude, you said that you think Sydney Sweeney is overrated. Agree to disagree. But to each their own. What's your take?
I'm waiting for the Gundam movie.
Oh yeah.
That'll be the ultimate.
I forgot she was cast in that. She got cast in that, and then she got cast in call it Split Fiction. In that game Split Fiction, like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's in that movie. I don't like those huge fake asses. Neither do I. Like the Iggy Azaleas out there, where he just looked like he had a poopy diaper.
This is Goro's lair. It is one of Shang Tsung's traps. You must find your way off the island before it crumbles into the sea. Make
I'm gonna
your
have
way
to totally
the
remember the
ocean.
controls on this.
X circle. Actually, you can look at this for reference.
I'm missing a little tutorial. Here's how to punch.
Oh yeah, that's what you meant. All right, it's working.
That can be jump. All right.
To be frank, Joey has a massive harem. Who told you?
Breakdancing.
He just started moonwalking. He's swinging it. Okay, quick attacks.
Launching attacks, power attacks, and throws.
I feel we're saying it with him, basically. I'll just take a screen grab and keep it right here.
For reference. Human marquee.
So we hear that for 8 hours. Oh, pick up.
I forgot how juggly this game is.
Yeah, it's like God of War. God of War.
Okay.
Let's get a hang of it.
Yeah.
Oh, it is juggly.
There we go.
Yes, I own the ball. Let me in. Look at that. Hit that. I think it's fatality or something.
Special moves.
Signature special attacks.
Her.
Oh shit, I can teleport.
Why have they not?
There's a theory. There's like actual evidence that they are working on it.
Oh, really?
Well, you know how like the collection came out not too long ago?
Yeah.
Boom was like, so what else do you guys want to see remastered? Deception or this? And I was like, we should kiss. You guys shouldn't need the game to make your own SFX. Oh wait. Why?
The ring sound effects are the best.
Thank you for the biddies.
What? See them in there. They're not.
Yeah. Thanks, Ezio. You a real one. Oh, I've only been doing running attacks.
I'm still like chopping up buttons. Hand up.
That was cool. What's that? What is it? In-game concept art? Hi. What the fuck? I mean, it would have been nice to play this on the actual PS2. Yeah, whatever. We tried, everybody. We tried. As if I can't get stream actual hardware or anything. Damn, bro. I'm like, it's been at least $10. Thank you. I can pay my rent.
For the first time, Joey.
Right. It's on my 5th lease here. I can double jump, right? Like. Thanks, Paul.
You can lock on
Leonardo
to your
Teninci.
enemies. When you are locked on, you will block incoming attacks and
That's
can
good to know.
perform evades.
Lock on and block. Hey.
Tight, yeah!
How do you do lock on? Oh, that's actually really helpful. So I was just like attacking the wing half the time, you know? I'm getting there. Oh yeah. Oh, it's forced me to block for. Oh, so we don't have to attack him. Just take. Let's just block damage.
Actually block.
Also, I'm just going to turn on stuff. Wait for that. Wait. Those are our only options. I can't hear without my subtitles.
It was a simpler times show in 2005.
You can pay for child support. Yeah, because I'm the kids. That bitch took the kids. I just want to see my son.
He gets to eat this week.
Cool, Jake. Oh yeah, fuck. It's a bloodthirsty. We gotta block.
Oh yeah.
Raiden is just like, you must perform a block of the rats, you fucking idiots.
There we go. I was like,
Mine. Yo, what's up, man? Hey, what up, Barrett? How you doing? Barrett, Chaz Barrett. What's up, dude?
When
What's it do?
multiple enemies surround you, do not concentrate on just one. Attack in different directions to hit them all.
all right.
Oh shit, that was cool.
Playing around.
No, they're related, right? Or they just trained each other? Are they? Difference, right?
I don't think they're brothers.
I'm not sure they both trained with, Koraichai.
Good old Koraichai. That's right.
Yeah, R2's. It's the most unintuitive pickup button of all time.
I have a bone. Ha.
How about some head? Skull. Oh, that was a spear. I got excited for reasons. My DNA. I assume this kind of video editing trickery don't interact with people like in real life, do you? Oh! Yeah, you know, like the chest burst? This is also a CGI. I made him in Blender.
I'm AI.
Yeah. Oh. Air combat.
While in the air.
We need you to.
That triangle was like a launch pad.
I think it is.
I hit it twice. Or it's like, maybe it's like Spider-Man where I hold it and I go in the air with it. I did it earlier, it's like a badass. Oh, he did it! Good job.
There we go.
What?
Goes around.
Pick up the skulls or combat.
Oh, dude, you're like, oh, dude, I got, oh, hell yeah. I don't think with Paul,
Sword. They're swords.
This is not a sword. It's like a
Magical swords.
like a farming tool. It doesn't even look like a weapon. Hey, yours is a sword. You got a cool, like, Kratos sword. Anyway, just playing Seeking City, having fun with Shaolin Monks, eh? Oh, I keep starting that. Oh my fucking god, Joey, it looks so good. Oh, thanks, Angel. How you doing? I'm trying to jump in there.
I'm pretty sure it'll hurt.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for the compliment, Angel. Doing good. How's your day going? Yeah. Yo, is that Smokey from the Projects? Big fan. Oh yeah, it's White Smokey.
What?
What would
That's my nickname.
Smokey the Oh shit.
Oh, I'll smoke this.
I wasn't sure if that was working on it.
Try and juggle him into the pit. Okay. Oh my god, they're like.
Oh dude,
There. That's
is that like Ed?
it kind of looks like Ed, yeah.
No, I watched Mortal Kombat 2
He's
again.
got a very anime
It
run.
was so good.
Something
Oh, I forgot to actually put Mortal Kombat on. You guys want to watch Mortal Kombat here?
Ambience, Joey.
Yeah, ambiance. I'm fucking up. Alright. Okay. Fuck yeah. Plus, you can kill Nazis. Oh, dude, once you get in, it gets good. Just mainline, just start. Oh, shit. Whoops. Until you unlock the shotgun, then you feel free to explore. The game's good. Has some crazy bullshit in there. I have it on PlayStation and Switch, funny enough.
Oh no.
I believe in you.
Everyone's gonna see me and my terrible platforming skill.
You're doing great, Jack.
Oh shit!
Oh my god. Ugh, ads. There's a fix for that. You ever watch Mortal Kombat Conquest? That's on in the background right now on the TV over there.
You have 3 level.
Well, I like the lights. I like the lights.
I love it. That's good.
Oh, cool. Even the pickup animations. I thought the screen crashed for a second. Did it? Oh, because we're all freaking out. What the fuck was that in the air? You saw that? Like a rocket.
Oh really?
I saw something. Reptile.
It is another of Shang Tsung's servants.
Ads.
Do not serve Shang Tsung.
Yeah, I've seen Conquest. It's very fucking 97. 97 TNT.
Is that when it came out?
I think so.
Conquest? Or the release with Annihilation?
Oh, cool.
Bummer.
Nice.
An alley-oop all day.
I love your friendship finisher shirt. Oh, thanks. And then you have the Japanese poster, right? Or who
It's
made
like
that
a
again?
mashup. It's Rucking Fountain.
Shout out to Rucking Fountain. Like fucking Fountain or
No. Yeah.
Ruck Fools.
We've got lots of. Have you seen the RoboCop one that Steve has? Is it?
I don't think I have. Maybe. Oh shit. We're Super Saiyans now. Oh, that's pretty high.
You now have the power to execute a fatality.
Basically, Xena with MK characters loved it. Oh yeah, that's actually a great way of putting it. It's a prequel. It has the great Kung Lao.
Execute a fatality to open these gates. Performing
baby.
combination acts builds your ability to execute a
I'm listening to that. Actually, I think we get prompts. Like we build up a combo, and then it's like press X and square root and shit. Target. How we doing? Let me Google how we do fatalities.
Oh, there we go.
enemy with the fatality stunner.
Stone Cold.
Oh, it's
Oh.
4, 5.
Yeah, like actual.
Hey, look, Cow. How you doing, man? Long time no see. Freedom. Welcome out of ad hell. You know, for the low price of $5.99. Oh wait, what do you say? Oh, we filled that up, and then we press L1 to do it. Wait, it's not MK95 in the background? That is MK95 right here. Oh, it's commercials. It's on VHS. So this is the trailer for Dumb and Dumber.
Or you're just playing Dumb and Dumber in the back.
That'd be fine. It's like, no, it's Mortal Kombat. That's what my mom told me. Man, those like mid PS2 graphics. Those were the days.
Okay, they're gonna eat you.
It's been a long time since games. Oh shit! I think you can do a fatality now.
Can I?
Press L1 on someone? Oh, yeah, you have to hit the button.
Oh, okay.
There you go.
Okay, well, I don't know the face.
I'm gonna show you. What'd you hit? Wait, was the map button?
Did I do that? Oh, I did. What was the directional?
Oh shit. Oh wait, dude, I thought it was Lou for a second.
Cheater.
It might be the same for you.
I tried to go forward and then. Yep.
Google that shit. I don't want to sound clear now. These demons kind of sound like Depeche Mode. Those ads took forever. They were the deal for the days. Yeah, they were. Try it again. Listen, we need to right. Square didn't work.
Oh, I lied.
Oh, wait, did you press square?
Yeah, I did.
Oh, we're gonna Google this. Oh, wait.
It's literally like inherent that one.
Yeah, check yours.
Was it under?
That's fucked up. Shaolin monks fatality.
I think fatality.
Yeah. Oh no. Is I'm pretty sure if you know them, then work. Okay. Here you go, buddy. You got a more complicated one.
They don't tell you nothing.
Oh shit.
And you gave him all the easy shit.
Well, you got left, right, down, square. There you go. Or
Hold on, please, demon. Let me input my.
Wait, let me look at my moves. That's good forever. Oh damn. Thank you for your prime sub, Cash Cow.
Actually, just realized it's around. It's a circle.
Oh, does it help you?
That
Okay.
one's not bad.
Okay.
Proof you guys.
I'll let you warm up so you can do it. Try it again.
On my back.
I don't see it.
There we go.
Tight. Yeah, cooler.
Just in time for the World Cup.
What do these do? Am I supposed to stay on it? Oh. I think they're probably just gonna keep going. They're gonna stand on these.
Yeah, are we supposed to use something?
Yeah, they're going.
Is
I'll be right there. I mean, yep. Alright. Probably a secret. I think the game has a lot of secrets. Oh yeah, I'm gonna do specials. There we go. What the fuck?
Enemies can also be used to allow you to progress. Now into the weak wall to the left to escape this area.
Oh, the weak walls over here.
Throw an enemy.
I think all these will work too. So we have like 10.
No, I'm gonna do this for the next 7 rounds.
That's a cool one though. I wouldn't be mad if that was like in the game.
Oh, that was clean.
Oh, nice.
I love how they have a lot of the like OG sound effects in the game. It's not.
I also like how we're seeing all the environments in like the same, like the pit. It's kind of cool seeing that like an actual like 3D.
Yeah.
It took a while, but we got it working.
We're here. We're in.
We made it.
You proud of me?
Proud of me, Papa. Wait. Oh, it's a save point.
Whoops.
You're good. Save. Bro, can you believe the upcoming release schedule of games? Shit is insane. Like, I can't remember it being this crazy. Yeah, honestly, we're gonna eat good this year. I think yellow is... Okay, cool. What game are you most excited for? Not Devil May Cry 6, huh? I actually thought they were gonna announce it. I was a little disappointed. Damn. I'm too scared to get that.
I'll get it. Okay. Dude, you
I landed on it.
to the bottom.
Oh, damn. I blocked it. Oh, wait, can I fatality him?
Now we gotta look at you.
Yeah, I gotta look at mine. Bitch, I wasn't even close.
Yeah, I totally forgot about blocking.
Doesn't matter what this guy sees. Guess I cleared the area. Oh, just jump, I guess. Makes sense too.
Yeah. Ow.
I don't see him in the games. I'm the most anticipated anymore. I sell my soul for whatever for a remake of Legend of Dragoon, but other than that, I'm just hyping the fan because I do get to enjoy. That's a fair. That's a good way to look. Just heal us.
Yeah, we're like,
Yeah, we're good.
we're kind of dying. Power up.
Oh,
The ability to perform a long jump.
yay. Oh!
I gotta figure out how to do like the bicycle.
Isn't that one of your specials? Oh shit. What health indeed? Oh, do we share health heals?
It kind of looks like that. Good more platforming. My favorite.
Visa.
Here. Oh.
At least like the jumps are like reliable, you know?
Yeah.
Oh, let me long jump over this motherfucker.
Now that we've long jumping.
Whee!
Oh no! Shit. Well, at least one of us made it. So
Well, I thought-
yeah. What was that?
They have to go at the same time because of the camera.
Really? One.
Well, you gotta get closer to the edge, maybe. 1, 2, 3. Oh.
We're... Oh, I'm down
I got
here.
it.
Well, you got it. I'll be there. Just hold on. Wait for me.
Very happy with what they showed for Final Fantasy 7 Part 3. That shit was mind blowing.
dude. Well, that didn't work.
Alright, let me get down there with
Get
you.
out of
Let me get down there with
here.
you. Got hard mode because of the camera. One second. Other than that, I can give you a list, but I don't think you actually give a shit unless we start talking about one of them. Plus, you're co-streaming right now. Yeah. It's all good. Just chit-chatting. Oh, shit. Thanks. No, we can't help, I think.
As long as one of us does it, I think.
We don't die in the process.
Yeah.
Right. On 3. Fuck.
No!
That's
Oh my god. Yeah. Oh my god.
Oh no!
I'm stuck.
Are you really?
Yeah, Bro.
Oh shit! Oh shit! Oh shit! Long jump out.
It won't let me. I mean, literally got me stuck in the fucking pit.
Fuck.
Dude, it's hella glitched.
Oh!
It won't.
Oh my god!
I'm boxed in. Dude.
All right. Well, we're back to a checkpoint for us.
That sucks. It wouldn't let you get out.
Had to see what they did with Veronica. Oh, dude, I'm really excited for that. Sub-Zero Mutality. So this is from that era. We probably should have saved because we might actually have to fight that boss again. But now we can do it better because we know not to hit on the the ground. Yeah. Fuck.
Oh shit.
PS2 is goated. It really is. What are you playing these days, Cash Cow? Did you took a break from Spidman, right? Spiderman. All right, we'll do better. Whee!
Having the sword is, yeah, messy.
Yeah.
Can't get it.
Trying to do fatality. Better. So yeah, when he hits the ground, oh, but the enemy hit me and pushed. Yeah, way better.
That was better.
Now we just have to
Jump.
yeah. And I'm not as attached to that concept art, so we don't have to do it. We were there, we were golden, it fucked us up. In the process of killing 54,000 zombies in Dead Rising to get the Mega Man Blaster. Oh nice, did you get the remastered one?
You now have the ability.
Okay.
I get stuck in there again.
That was a little rude.
That way.
That's experience. How do we get health? Ew. Alright. 1, 2, 3.
Dude, why do we stop?
Actually, last time we were pretty good at that. What happened this time? We're in our own heads. We gotta.
I'm not kidding you. This was always the part in like I'm honestly just terrible at platforming stuff, so I'm going for a long one. All right, 3, 2, 1. All right,
cool.
It's like, oh fuck.
Why am I platforming? I can literally teleport. I should be like Nightcrawler. Just on Humble Bundle. Oh, nice. Oh, that's right. They did do. Oh, we're gonna save. I'm not doing that again. Or
I'm calling this in. Put your hands behind your back.
I fucking love this movie. Ooh. I saved.
Alright. Maybe.
There we go. I think I hit no by accident. Okay, I think we're good. All right.
shit.
3, 2. Oh. You. I said no. I was hoping to teleport. Watch after all the comment. This is where we fucking like we get stuck.
We actually never complete the game because we can't.
Can't platform work again. Raiden, we're sorry.
He's just looking down at us like, on these guys.
Maybe I chose the wrong ones.
Can't jump.
Good thing we saved too. So just all right. 3, 2, 1. Oh! How did that happen? No, get out!
Get out of there.
Okay. I thought I got stuck like you did.
Dude, it looked. I just could have sworn I got it.
Dude,
The game's fucking
Oh, shit.
doesn't.
we like got it the first time. Why? Oh fuck! I didn't long go.
Ah. I'm gonna have nightmares about jumping over the
The
bridge.
scariest enemy is just the fucking gaps in Mortal Kombat lore.
All right.
3, 2, 1. What the actual fuck?
All right. Well,
Alright.
here we go. We did it. It's fine. That way.
Did the check. God, railing. Damn it. Oh, guys, I thought they were like peaceful. There.
Okay.
Yeah, I think bicycle kit. You have to be able to bicycle kit.
The
Like a
guards
lead, you
ahead
can't.
hold the key to the only portal on this island. Defeat them.
Yeah, I kept
When
them.
you lock on to an enemy, you will block incoming attacks.
So you have to like let it.
Bring out.
Sir, you should be. No, we're good. Okay, this guy's annoying.
Oh, we have to. Yeah. Nice. Get out of here.
We're jumping.
Wushu Academy. Like sliders. Remember that show?
Long ago, in the magic realm of Outworld, Shao Kahn hungered for power, for strength, for all things.
This isn't in your way? You good?
No, yeah, I'm good.
The blood he spilled in his brutal conquest of Outworld is impossible to measure or imagine, as was his hunger.
Dude, I missed this
Once
shit,
all
you know?
the city was under his control, Shao Kahn turned his attention to Earth.
Opening a
But the
Kingdom
Elder
Hearts.
Gods had created a mystical tournament to protect Earth,
Like
known
adventure.
as Mortal Kombat. Shao Kahn could only lay claim to Earth if his champions were victorious in the tournament. Thus far, Earth's warriors have triumphed, saving Earth.
Watch
But some
Masters of the
fights only
Universe.
require
You gotta
a
watch
lone
Obsession,
victory,
man. That shit was cool.
and all can
It
be
was
lost
good?
I liked it a
with
lot.
single defeat.
Like I know you were telling me about like I guess the monetary side of things, which is shitty. Oh, this was
Once
earlier, by the
again
way.
this day.
But
But there is no power in these metals apart
Like,
from
we
the
can
knowledge
attach
you
it,
must
yeah,
carry
an adapter.
into
But
every
anyway,
battle. That no one is a champion.
yeah, dude, it was really
alone.
like uncomfortable. It was
If one of us
hilarious.
is in
It was
chains,
awesome.
none of us are free.
Saw it right
If
after you
even
did.
one succeeds, the victory is ours.
Oh.
Liu Kang, you have defeated the sorcerer
that's
Shang
nice.
Tsung.
Ugly
You
Liu
have saved
Kang.
this realm as your forefathers did from his evil. You are Earth Realm's champion and
So
hero.
using the game models for
Thank you,
Next.
Master Raiden. When next the tournament is fought,
recently finished playing
you'll
Kingdom
be
Hearts 2.
my
Dude, those data
ancestors that
fights
are honored.
and
Sonya
Yeah.
Blade, you were a warrior
Kingdom
before
Hearts
the
is hard,
tournament
man.
began. But here you have been
God, look at
tested
Raiden.
and triumphed
His
against
eyes.
enemies
He's got
beyond
halibut
Earth's
eyes, too.
measure.
like
Thank
extra
you,
chromosomes
Master
in your eyes.
Raiden.
I know you have your chief officers to report
Somebody
to.
wrangled
Know
Know
Well,
that
this
you
is
will
like a
always
creative
have
character.
friends and warriors willing to help you in your future missions.
Sir,
Johnny Cage,
Lay it on me, Raiden.
I'm good.
Bow, you idiot.
Despite your natural shortcomings, you have proven yourself a valuable ally against Shang Tsung. You have the respect of myself and the Shaolin Order.
Moving on. Movie is on.
Master. Ah, Kung Lao. Family honor is not won in a single day. It is won all the days of a life. It is won in fidelity and faithfulness. It is achieved through perseverance. There is not a warrior here that would have survived if you had not warned them of the traps in Goro's lair.
Haunting.
Your family has been honored.
Somebody looked
Your
at that and was like,
friends honor
yeah,
you as well.
Yeah, yeah.
that's good, yeah.
Girl.
Done.
For the moment, you have earned rest. Enjoy the peace you will find walking these grounds.
He's stay.
You want to split that beer?
Yeah, I'm down. Put 2 straws in it.
That's actually fucking hilarious, bud.
These outworld abominations are poison to our world. Even their blood and rotting bones are like an acid to this realm. You must send them back to where they came from. Defend the academy.
It's funny. I think the last time, technically, you were on one of my earlier streams because I forgot to mute. Everybody thought like you were fooling around or something, which is funny.
Who's that guest?
Is it you came over to pick something up and I forget? I think we were just chit chatting.
Sausage pizza.
He opened pizza. Perfect timing. We're like Gaiden.
That's what happened to the eyes.
Fucking download.
Yeah, dude.
What do you do, Jay? Combat so like, would you say it's like the best lore in fighting games?
There's a lot. There's a lot there.
Oh, the spiky holes.
Oh, we gotta. Ow, jeez.
Are we still damaged from the last fucking level?
Right, yeah, you guys never had time to heal.
Oh, okay, so there, this is
The map is kind of handy.
Wait, I'm blue, right? No, I'm red. Let's go this way. Wait, is this where we came from?
We need to get these keys.
Oh, okay, okay. So, yeah, we're gonna go left. I think that's a safe spot. Whoa! I don't trust our ability to do this. I'll try it. Ah, okay, that wasn't that bad. Oh shit, the camera was like,
Yeah, I was drifting. Yeah.
A statue filled with evil.
Wait, what is it?
A statue filled with evil energy blocks
Oh,
your
Fist of
path.
Ruin. Okay,
You will
we gotta
lead
jump back. Alright. Fuck!
Or jump in.
Was it your balls he came to pick up? That's funny. No, I'm trying to remember, because you came by to pick something up. And then I was like, oh, I forgot to mute, and everybody was just like, oh.
Confirmed. Joey likes by people.
You're like the one I tolerate.
The 1 point.
You're the one white. You white, but you still my nigga. With this tongue. Oh, nice, nice. That's actually funny. What's the question, Jay? What are you playing?
It's just.
That was cool.
Oh, he's back. And hit him with the fire. And he's still alive.
Oh, spongy. That's okay. That just gives more opportunities to go.
Gosh. Okay, this guy's gonna. I think we're gonna have to like fatality this guy.
Let me look him up. Let me do another one. Let's do friendly rabbit. No, let's do arm cutter. I should. Yeah, just Google Shaolin monks fatalities.
You going good old game facts?
Yeah.
Dude, that brings me.
I'll play Guild Wars. Done survival before. Oh, you're playing with everyone? Nice. Yeah, dude. I don't. I think $20 is too much for that. Also, if it was still on sale for $5, I would have gotten it. But nah. For a game, I'm gonna play like 4 times with you guys max. Oh yeah, we gotta like block this guy. Oh nice. Oh, we have to go through that fire. Oh boy. We're about to die.
You jump right in here. Oh, I do. Excellent. We are almost dead. Is this health? This little red guy?
I don't
that
know.
We can't get.
We have to do the punch of whatever.
I'm scared.
Fucking should be.
Yeah, like this Cotton's caught fireballs and a couple hats, and he's like, I'm fine.
Oh, nice. Oh, an old fashioned.
We did it.
Wanna play Guild Wars? Joey. Hey, what up, dude? Suck. Thank you. Appreciate it. You always know just what to say. I guess we backtrack. Oh, yeah. Go past the fire again. Back to that one thing that we were at. Who's fighting over there? Is our canyon just a monk?
Still king.
I like it.
Scary.
Oh shit. Oh. What are you up to, Barrett? You playing anything cool right now? No hearts? Is that what they said?
Yeah.
Talking shit game? Okay, good. We're working on it. I don't know if you noticed, but the game doesn't heal us between levels. You said, oh yeah, you did say that. Well, we're at full health now. Hey, games are like punishing.
I was the game punished me for sucking. Like,
Yeah, remember when like games didn't have checkpoints?
they're like, it's fine. We'll start you right back. We gotta lock in. Take time.
Oh, we can't see his health by the way.
Yeah.
That's like Street the Bridge rule. Have we ever been fucking movie?
Yeah, they made an announcement like a week ago.
It's like the third fucking. That's it.
No, this one was from Variety, so I think it's legit.
Okay. What studio or filmmaker? I forget. They got the Sonic.
It's yeah, because it's like a Sega production. So.
Did you see Sonic 3?
Yeah,
I liked it.
I'm
Oh, wait,
very,
you can't go there.
I'm very forgiving of Sonic. I appreciate the car.
I think it's the best you can do for a live action Sonic movie. You have Street Fighter 6. Oh shit. I don't think so, but also I don't really like the Street Fighter games. I like the characters, but I don't like the games and stuff. I prefer like Soul Calibur and Mortal Kombat.
I watched the Street Fighter 2 anime yesterday.
It's so good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that movie. That's my favorite Street Fighter or anything so far.
The new movie soundtrack for it. That's why I'm hoping the soundtrack for the new movie is good. That was like my one complaint for the new Mortal Kombat movie was like we could have had like more, I don't know, some better songs. In it.
Yeah, because like the movie right behind me, dude, I still get hyped when the fucking reptile fight plays, you know?
Yeah, like the reptile fight, and like like orbital, orbital at the end. Yeah, like those are classic songs. Like you don't have any of that in this game. It's missed opportunity. The block.
But Tifa though. Oh yeah, I heard about that. Yeah, you see that Tifa's gonna be in Fighter 6, so like a weird character.
Oh really?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I've been trying to do it. You just do that and then you jump and grab him? Is that what you're doing?
Yeah, just like pop them up. Alright, I thought we're doing, I think, a little better.
A lot better. But like, definitely like in the last like stretch of health run coming over here.
Come on. How do I kick him in the... Throw him.
Yeah, Tifa, it's perfect. We didn't see any gameplay, we just saw it being announced. But yeah, Tifa works for Fire. Honestly, for guest characters, I was always hoping Tifa would be like in I can. We got fucking Noctis, but no fucking Tifa. You suck. Carrying me.
Oh. How did you hear it? You got more XP, really.
Oh. What do you got? Oh, sure. Get over here. Got.
Whoa.
I like having these up.
I honestly keep forgetting to do them. I could be doing a lot more control.
They've been shopped around for the past few. I guess they decided to put Tifa in the game instead. I've been hearing very mixed things about the latest tech in the game. I think my favorite still might be either Tech Attack 1 or Tech Attack 2. Oh, I was like, is that it? Oh shit. Oh, you got like Matrix slow.
Right? What was...
Oh, he did the thing that Shang Tsung does to his brother.
Oh, okay.
It could look like a little bit. Predator won the betting war. Basically, she could have been Tekken, but not enough money. Oh, is that really what happened? I think she would have been perfect.
Ooh, Sly, how'd you do that?
How did I do that? Oh, just run for a bit and then press square. We're stuck here. Oh fuck. Platforming. Yay. Favorite. Oh wait. I tried to ward him. Okay.
And...
No!
Shit. Oh my god.
Oh my god.
Oh, I tried to...
I'm just
juggle him in the corner, dude.
He just
Explodes, yeah.
Damn, look at our health again. Fuck, do we heal?
They give you no... I was gonna say, they give you no, like, health in this game.
Wait.
Are you not supposed to go that way?
Oh. Look at the keys. I think we're fucking up. I think we got too far, or set in our ways. Oh, wait. A few different fighting games wanted her. Also, I heard, because people campaign for characters to be in, you know, like Tekken and shit. I would have wanted Kiryu from Yakuza in Tekken also. I think he would be perfect with his variation styles and stuff.
Not again.
You ever fuck with Yakuza, dude?
No, I haven't.
It's like, it's weird because there's so much extra content, but that's like the game. It's like a 10-hour game stretched to like 100, and it's amazing. It's like the best use of their space, immersive, and you get to run like a fucking cabaret.
Well, now. I'm interested. Dude.
Christ. Leave her alone.
Mortal Kombat's like the best wrestling show.
Dude, MK2 fucking just hit her with the hammer. She was like flew off screen. I was like, nice.
They're coming in through the front gate.
All right. Y'all got some help over there too?
They're crawling in the windows and
They're eating cats and dogs.
Johnny.
Oh, we got more platforms. Stand down. Oh, nice. I think it's the same one we did last time. Actually, no.
Oh, I know the one. Yeah.
Is that what it's called?
No.
Oh. Oh, shit. Oh, yeah. You have to combo up. Oh, yeah. Right, you're ready. Honestly, I think the fatalities are like lifesavers in this game. Because the enemies can be a little spongy. Fucking Johnny, fuck off! He's doing shit.
I know, like, let me get in here. Finally.
Yeah. Everyone called this unfriendly round.
The only one that matters.
Oh shit, you got an animality?
I'm at the I get it.
A snake.
Yeah.
Fatality.
Yeah, dude, they should like remake or remaster this or make another one. Or finish Fire and Ice. Get some health. We should, oh, can we save her here?
Do I need help in there?
Up here? I'm probably gonna have broken it down like throwing an enemy out there. I wouldn't save, I'm scared. I'm gonna die. Oh. Hey, that's probably it. Oh, we can't leave there yet. Fine!
Oh, leaving. Nope.
Yeah, easy health. I think we share health, funny enough.
You're supposed to like throw their bodies in.
Okay, well. Probably not
Pushing
okay.
on. Oh, it's dead. Right into it. Oh my god.
He was good. I like piloting him, dude.
Oh my god.
Oh, I'm taking damage though. Okay. I know how to get off.
Oh.
That didn't work.
No.
Oh god. Oh god. Is it really gonna put us right back? We have experience though, so maybe we have to like. It was like. How do you feel about Tupac being a stranger than heaven? I think it's fucking weird. Do it. Don't do it. Oh. Okay. There's a checkpoint. We just gotta watch her get her ass beat. Can we skip it? Yeah. Is yours called like Animality or what do you got?
No, it was just the dragon.
Okay. This game does have checkpoints, so I like it. I was a little worried we have to start all over. They keep running press circle to the ground. spend this experience on anything?
Well, I know you get more by doing the fatalities. Oh, you have to buy them?
Yeah, we upgrade.
Oh.
We're gonna be able to purchase.
What?
Level up. We'll break a chain.
Oh, okay. I want to go shopping.
Okay, yeah, it looks like it costs 3,000. Sorry, I should have warned you. And combos, nice. Okay.
Sick.
Ooh,
High low.
you can do 2.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you've been throwing fireballs a lot. I should ricochets now.
There we go.
We're still fighting.
Now we can eat again.
Oh, hell yeah, dude. Okay.
Game changer.
The rules have changed.
You've been nerfed this whole time. Bet you that's like, you have to be like Sub-Zero or something.
You think so? Because I know you can.
Some of that stuff I think you can only access certain parts of the other characters.
That's how we never actually like got it though, you know? Like fire nice.
Yeah.
Hey, what up, Dead Wolf? How you doing? Trevor.
What's up, dude?
Cracker! Oh, I got one.
A rabbit in a hat.
Unfriendly rabbit. Is the rabbit gonna kill him? Oh, this is a reference. Didn't he have a fatality like this?
Oh,
In like the OG?
Dude, that rabbit is amazing.
I'm gonna it's a rabbit. What do you do, Devil? That's so fucking weird.
Where's my...
I'm getting the hang of the juggle. I seem to like get used to the fact that R2 is grab. Like, that's so weird to me. It's like half the fun. Now to buy this shit, just look it up, you know? Honestly, it's crazy. When this game came out, there were Java phones. You know,
Oh man,
yeah,
yeah.
you couldn't Google this on the phone. They probably could, but like
My computer in 2005 was pretty shitty.
mine was riddled with viruses because of me.
You and Joey.
Downloading episodes of Smallville and watching hardcore pornography.
Viruses actually came from the Smallville episodes.
Right. No, dude, I remember one time we had viruses, and then my sister was doing like a scan, and then I saw all the history, and I was like, then you saw like spank wire, fucking,
Dude, I'll
all the
never...
fucking things. I'm just like, so ashamed.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I'll never forget the like, I think I was downloading like Family Guy episodes, and my mom got a letter from Cox, and it was like basically cut that shit out, or we're gonna cut your cable, and it was worth it.
My hat is the obvious choice here.
What are we supposed to do?
It says you need something sharp. I swear to God, if I have to grab a sword when I have a buzzsaw for a hat,
Sir, give me a sword.
is this like the
Is
fucking
there-
Lego games where it's like I gotta come back as a different character?
Probably.
Or actually, yeah.
No, we're gonna need a weapon. Was there a weapon down here?
I didn't see any.
It's with the koi fish. Fuck.
Right, look at that. Look, it's just the texture. That's what's so sharp.
The koi fish has
Yeah.
like a shiv in his mouth.
Oh, did we come from here? Over here. Did we come from here? Oh, sorry, wrong button. We can just select being the map. Hey, what up, you boy? Is that the TV always? Wait, is that the TV I always keep hearing about movies in the background? Yeah, that's the one. So I rearranged my shit because I got new gear. Hey, shout out to Kevin.
Oh.
Oh! isn't sharp enough. That's ridiculous. Oh my god, that did so much damage. Oh my god, look at our health.
We're done.
Bullshit, my hand is sharp enough. Look at this. I can cut a Tarkanian limb from him. I can't cut a fucking rope.
No, man. Fucking roll.
I wonder if I'm just not doing the right move. Do you think we need like a sword here? We're so dead. Johnny! Take over. Avenge. Dude! Did we just double our move?
I think so.
Did you hit me with a fireball and I fucking divided it?
Yeah, I think so. If I get it.
I don't know the feature. Oh, that is health. Okay, it's health and experience. We just need to quit sucking and then we get health.
Turns out this whole time we just weren't good.
Are you going to try to unlock Johnny Cage? Is Johnny Cage unlockable? Because I know for sure there's like a bad fighting game component to this that you unlock when you beat the game. And you unlock Scorpion Sub-Zero.
Yeah.
I believe you unlock Baraka and maybe like Reptile or Smoke or something. Bro, this game is low-key awesome. Yeah, you know what's funny? It's like one of those things where it's like, oh, it's a hidden gem, but like everybody knows about it and talks about it. And it's actually gotten a crazy resurgence to popularity lately. Oh, look! Oh, up there, this sword. Motherfucker, I have a buzzsaw hat. That's just weird design.
You're like, the rope?
I like how the fatalities are still like inputs. I remember when Domino's was playing this game and it was on G4 TV. I don't know if when G4 TV was good. How can beating with a rabbit? Oh, dude, you play that game? Whiplash? Where you play as like a what the fuck? Some kind of rodent, like a weasel, and you have like you're in a lab and test animals, right? And you're chained to a rabbit and beat the shit out of enemies with a rabbit.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's actually pretty fun, like PS2 platforming. Thank you so much for the raid. Dara, I appreciate you. How you doing, Dara? Thank you for the raid. On a good stream, what were you playing? What were mods give? Shout out.
I tried to do one of these mentalities, but I guess.
We have to unlock it, I think. Raiden nerfed us. Oh, we have to get going, I think. I think we might just keep going. We gotta grab the swords over here. But it's also a nice opportunity to heal. We can do this for I honestly see like this game getting better. Leveling up, I didn't know that was a thing.
Yeah, you can buy more shit.
I got Buzzsaw. I haven't done Buzzsaw yet. I'm just doing Dead by Daylight. How's everyone? Playing some co-op Shaolin Monks with one of my best friends. Oh man. Hurry. Here's bud.
Cheers.
Oh shit. Dick first. Oh.
Ouch.
Did you find the hidden character icon in the Wuxi Academy level of Johnny? Oh, okay. Oh yeah, I like. Man, you want a few characters.
Hang out over here.
I think this might give us some more help. Yeah, let's go. Let's go. Oh wait, how do we backtrack? How we got here? On the other side of this, I think, right? Or I think we go this way. We can backtrack over here, though. Is it right? This way. Huh?
There's something in here.
It's I think this
not.
was it actually. Yeah.
Hey, there we go.
Okay. Oh, dude, I'll take it. All right, we got swords.
Yeah.
R2 to pick up is should be like illegal. No, don't throw it. We need it.
Just kidding.
Oh my god. Alright, let me just make a beeline for it. Fuck you, Johnny. Hey, I think, was it this one or the other way?
Like I'm an Aladdin villain.
I don't know if this was it. I think it's the other one. Yeah, let's go back. Let's go back. Or yeah, I think it was this way. You're doing great, Johnny.
Hold it down. You mutants.
Fucking muties. You get the next one.
Yeah, there we go.
I literally have a hat that can do this. That's insane to me.
The mechanic for that, they
Hellfire.
could have done something.
Oh, he's watching the scorpion fight.
Nice.
I love you. Oh, the fucking, yeah. What the fuck happened to the audio? Okay. Oh,
Too much action.
the game's too awesome. This PS2 game killed my 4090. Alright, 64 games of DDR5 not enough for you? Okay, yeah. Wait, is this where it came from? No, we gotta go somewhere else, right? Is it? I think it's this way. Straight. Yeah. I think I'm playing Resident Evil with these angles.
Yeah.
Like, it's so disoriented.
These controls are...
2005 was a different time. Ed Boon is a dumbass. Shouldn't this be called Wuxi monks instead of Shaolin monks? Actually, probably. Shaolin's cooler. It sounds cool. It doesn't flow like Wuxi.
Wuxi.
Wuxi monks. Looks like Homeboy at Little Trouble in
Big Trouble in China.
You are violating the rules of Mortal
what's-
Kombat, you traitor.
It's not Lo Wang. That's when fucking. It's a name like that.
Like Lopan or something?
Lopan,
yeah.
She flows off the tongue. Good guess though. Good guess. What do you mean? Oh, this guy?
It's his eye. Chaz.
I made him an AI. It's canon now.
Yeah, I'm not a real person.
Now this is one of my best friends. We went to school together. You know, we didn't hang out until after we graduated.
Maybe like that something.
Best catchphrase ever though. That was fun. That was LA trip, right?
Yeah.
And it was me, you, and Dom.
Times.
Crushing it right now.
We're dying a little less.
Well, it's good. It does have checkpoints. I actually thought we were gonna have to start going over when we died that last time. Yeah, thanks, Chaz. He's about as good at games as you are. Thank you.
Checks out. That fire scares me.
Oh, we have to jump over it. I jumped, didn't you? The long jump.
I did.
What's to the right? Actually, what is this? Interact? Okay.
There you go.
Just your
Oh, what?
Pull the lever.
Make your ass on the show off and do it. Explodes. It doesn't even.
I mean, you earned all those viruses on that computer in 2005, right?
This is for Spankwire. It's like I have a very specific memory of when the history was discovered, and I remember it was like, oh, Lily Tai, and I was like, oh shit, no, no, look, Alita, no, it's my sister.
Oh no.
And then she took the blame, and I was like, and then I felt bad, so I was like, no. Go this way.
Your mom's like super lesbian? Oh shit, I gotta get my sword. No. Here.
I guess we go this way. If only they knew someone that could control rain that was a ninja to put those fires out. Oh, Tempest? That's his name, right? Tundra. That was Kuai Liang's name before he came to Sub-Zero, right? And he did water. He's also talking about rain, but that's funny. Oh, is that canon? I think Tundra might be canon.
Dude, that's not made up like fan character.
It could be. I swear I heard that it was Kuai Liang's alias before he became the next Sub-Zero. I could be wrong. Somebody fact check me. Where the fuck do we go?
Where? Yeah. God. I love how these poor monks are like, we're on fire, and we're like, yeah, we're gonna have to kill you, sorry.
We backtrack? We can do a leading go anywhere we can. Oh, there's a door right here, actually. See, we can go there. Check that one. Oh, wait, I think
It's over here, right? There's something over here, though.
Die from this fire.
What about over here?
Where we came from. Let me look it up. Where did we go?
What are we?
Oh, wait, there's water up here.
You must use the
Use the element which brings life. That was fun. Yeah, that's a fight happening right now, I think. Oh no, I think it ended. What do we do? Water on the roof. Oh.
Oh, well, shit.
That wasn't that obvious.
You didn't know.
I think I can. Oh, do it. Test your mic. It's R2.
There we go. Here we go. Button mash. Is it X?
Yeah. L1 when you're ready. You said you earned those viruses.
Well done.
I did. It passed for now. The little ad flare up is over. Another one. Oh, wait, don't jump. Back. Want your sword?
Oh, yeah. Fix it up with his toes. Oh, this sword?
Kicks it like a fucking skateboard. Actually, that might have been it. I think there's. Okay, what's up here?
I think there's another one we have to. I think I got dice.
These swords change everything.
This sword is, yeah, like a fireball.
Just your might.
We can all just. For it.
Now you're just showing off.
A little bit.
Well done.
Kung Lao is getting greedy. He already has a razor hat and he wants a scythe. Hey, there's a scythe. The scythe is like the. Oh, sickle? It's the shorter one.
Well, that's like a scythe.
Get up.
I already have my, I have my Aladdin sword.
We're fine. Here's my hat.
A statue filled with evil energy blocks your path.
You don't have it.
A statue.
But we go this way?
Oh. Fire.
You wanna do that one?
Just your might.
That was the challenge.
Damn you ads! I just saw that. I think. Got one more.
What's happening down there? Oh yeah, they're on fire.
It's a long jump, I think. we go. Oh, walk on. What about that? Alright.
Test your might.
I have to make it on the line. Break my hand.
You can test it. Oh, no, it's not on the line. Yeah.
Oh. It'd be funny if it like actually damaged us a little bit.
Test your might.
I spit on it. Okay.
He grabs the little spoke and he's just like.
Like, you sure I have to do this, Raiden? Yes, trust me.
Hitting his hand. I think it's the most realistic thing that's happened. Dude, for real. That or us jumping and immediately landing in spikes. That's also pretty real. Oh shit. Oh shit. I think the water's out. Let's go.
They took Sonya and killed I don't know how many folks.
This is a very Van Damme Johnny Cage right here.
Can you imagine? I want to see the parallel universe where he was actually, dude. The guy that they got in this movie, that guy's awesome. I think I like him more than Carl Urban, to be honest.
Yeah, I think he feels like more of the
Johnny. He's like
Johnny,
age appropriate. He looks like him. Wait. I think it's where we came from, so we're going this way. Yeah. What does that logo mean? Oh. Oh.
secret health.
Ronnie, where do we go? Do we backtrack?
If like jump back up here and
Let us leave. Hey, I don't know. Oh.
yeah.
Tight. Miz, not Mix. They should have gotten the wrestler, the Miz, to play Johnny. Actually, maybe. I could see it.
Like playing hacky sack and shit over there in the woods. Patty
Do you
in the
trust me?
forest, boys. Yo, work.
Listen to my words as you continue your exercises, for you will need to remember them later. Shang Tsung is not as
fucking
defeated as we
eyes,
had
dude.
hoped. I faced him while you fought the attacking mutants.
Yeah,
More,
there's so
I
many
believe
ratings
he
over
now
here.
defies the elder gods themselves. Baraka could not have come with a legion of
Your
mutant
next
scum
mission
had
is
Shang
to
Tsung
find
not
me a
been aiding
LASIK
him.
doctor.
With his defeat in the Mortal Kombat tournament, he will be
I'm gonna
anxious
send you
to
to the
prove
nether realm.
himself
You can find my
superior
extra
to you
chromosome.
and take his vengeance.
And
This
my
will make him
insurance plan
reckless
that'll
and
allow
more
me
dangerous
to
than ever.
see an optometrist.
That's why his eyes are white.
Dude, yeah.
It's a birth defect.
I had hoped you would have time to heal your wounds in the tournament, but I was gravely mistaken.
And the other gods
You must
fucked
go
you
to
up, Raiden.
Outworld. We must take the battle there if we are to save Earth.
I am weary after the tournament, but rest is a luxury afforded only to the dead. Of course I will go to Outworld.
And what of you, Kung Lao? What do you say?
Of course.
Take the portal to Outworld.
Oh. That's not a Raiden.
That's not my rating.
Keep looking. Kill him.
An alien,
Get him
dude.
out of his misery. Oh, I guess we're going through.
Fire and flames. Yeah. I try to catch the fire. More fire, more better.
It's either catch fire or catch on fire. Wait. Because I do see... There's a platform over here. Oh, damn, I keep pressing select. Select is the better of these fucking buttons.
You go around it.
Yeah, there's a whole ass area over here. We go back to the previous...
I was gonna say, are we going backwards?
Shang Tsung should keep talking himself up while he's integrating. Like, I fought Shang Tsung, and you should we're the adversary, so strong, even built as a Magnum dog, and I was barely able to beat him. Oh, this is where he came from. Alright, so. makes no fucking sense. This isn't where we fucking. Where it spat us out, you know?
Yeah.
At least it loads quick. Fuck you, PS2 disc.
Shame.
I mean, this looks better. It's not doing the whole interlaced flicker.
You gotta run it through. Isn't Retro City games like when you? Or they have to supposed to have like guarantees?
Yeah, but I'm not sure if they'll honor it from a decade ago.
Listen, hear me out. It's been 10 years.
Nice.
I think you've been a loyal customer with Retro City games.
Retro City games. Oh yeah, you want to level up?
Yeah, let's do. Specials. Well, those are pricey. That guy. Honestly, I've been doing like no uppercuts.
How do you don't have the bicycle kick? Where's that?
That's. I'm guessing.
Flying kick. Oh, and then maybe that second one's the
Yeah.
the bicycle kick. You think?
Uh,
Yeah, it's got it.
All right, your turn.
I'm trying to launch him into the fucking the wall. Oh, I fell. Yeah. I know. He's still alive. Oh no, he's not. He had health. Oh yeah. Pressing these by accident. It's a cozy controller. I like this one. This one.
That's not around anymore, right?
Stadia? No, they died like after like I think they made it a year.
Where is this?
Price return. Started. I don't really teleport. I do be doing the spin attack. Italy. Oh, nice. I like that. Oh, wait. I might save up. I need like
Poor limp wrist.
I'm gonna get you.
Yeah. Jargon's like, fuck. I'm not touching that guy.
Fuck. Oh, fuck. I didn't mean to do that. Again. Looks like we can go here. Somewhere. Go around.
Maybe we can go through here.
I felt very confident in that. In fact,
Maybe one of these?
yeah. I was thinking, I was like, in fact, I think we can long jump and do it. Go.
If I were Raiden.
Wait. You're a little fucking. Oh, dude, I'm upset he didn't do that in the movie, but he did the move, we didn't save. So,
We're so good, dude.
this. It's taking us back. And so both of those take us back to the same fucking spot. There's the other exit that we did. Remember up top? Yeah, what the fuck? No scenes.
Map be mapping.
Like Resident Evil. Stadia is super dead. Oh, yeah, it is hella dead. But they made a cozy controller. I like this one.
At least it still works.
Yeah, I mean,
The redeeming.
so it was technically like a Wi-Fi controller at first, and then they had like a one-time update you can do before they ended service to turn it into a Bluetooth controller. And I did it. It worked. Otherwise, I think it'd be bricked by now. Where do we go? Oh, I'm so confused. Is there like objective? Toggle,
Yeah, I'll tell you
navigate,
shit.
Rose layer, Ushi. Or here. Oh, okay, and then that takes us back. I'm pretty sure. Oh, missions. I'll go pee. All right, you're back.
How dare you?
Sure.
All right. whoopee cushion under his seat.
Only there were whoopee cushion.
Damn it, so.
Oh,
What?
damn it. What do you mean, like the whoopee cushion app?
They didn't know. I was checking the chat. I was like, oh, if only there were whoopee cushions.
That'd be awesome. Wait, is that real? Well, he's got a whoopee cushion. Let's see. Nice. Yeah, where the fuck do we go? Good boy. You know where to go. Where do we go? Our enemies down there. Nothing else. I think. That kills me. Oh,
What? Oh, come on.
that's bullshit, dude. Because I went there and I died. Saw that, right?
You
Like,
probably fell that way.
Couldn't put it past me.
You gotta fall the right way, dude.
Oh wait.
I feel like I should dump this sword. Enjoying it too much.
Yeah, enjoy it. I'm gonna do the unfriendly rabbit again.
That poor rabbit.
Right? No, rabbit's. It's fine.
It is evil because like you see how he looks after. He's like,
They burrow in him and he like jack bursts.
damn, it feels
Right,
good to
head.
be a gangster. Go that way.
Yeah.
All right, I'm dumping the sword. It was fun while it lasted. What is that move? Oh, it went away. We don't have limp. Oh, yeah.
It's Shaolin. Atos. Yeah.
Shaolin monks.
Seconds. Oh, I see.
Or you control it?
I think it just like hovers.
Oh.
Area. Oh wait. Oh yeah, I can grab these motherfuckers and like pilot them. Oh, to release, press X. I didn't know that.
Honestly, I feel like the combo specials in this game were pretty like ahead of its time.
For like a 3D beat 'em up kind of game,
Mhm. I just pick this one back up. Man.
What the fuck? What the fuck?
Raiden.
It's Raiden. Good looking out, bud.
It was really Shanks.
Yeah, I think this being here also feels a little more open still in a weird way.
Mhm.
Bunch of PS2 games were like that. Yeah, there was like God Hand and stuff. Yeah, we're 50% done with the game.
I think we're 50% of the level. There's no way in hell we're 50%.
50% done with it because we got to
With the game?
Yeah, we were halfway through Gorwa's Lair and just at 5%.
No.
I think so. We'll wait till the next save.
There may be a warning. Warning? All magic carries warnings, Koklao. We must be cautious.
This is like a 7-hour game. We're only like an hour and a half into it.
Plowing through it.
Warnings. I know how Shang Tsung thinks. I will not have as much power in Outworld. But here, I have the power to make the way safe.
Damn, Shang Tsung is super strong, by the way.
If I had
It's so
let you
cool,
enter
guys,
before,
right?
You would have been pulled inside out. This is what I can offer you in the conflict to come.
If I die, just know that Shang Tsung's a pretty cool guy.
Yes, he's our adversary, but I idolize him very much. I think so. Oh, got him. Oh, we can air recover.
There's no way that we're.
It might be. Whenever we get to,
I don't want to look.
Master Raiden,
The amount of times we've fallen into the pit, too, dude. There's no way.
very well.
bumbling idiots making my way through it.
Resistance to Liu Kang. After all, your magics are too limited in Outworld.
That is correct, Kung Lao. But I can still
Looks less
use my
derpy here.
knowledge of this place.
He's
I will
angry.
try to hide my presence from Shang
His eyes
Tsung.
even out.
I dare not attract his attention and therefore endanger you.
Yes,
Yeah,
Master
his
Raiden.
face model
And
looks
should you encounter
Yeah, I think it's the cinematic model.
Be cautious. This place changes even the most honorable of warriors. She may no
The
longer
eyes.
be a friend.
What did Vinny send me? Vinny's playing. Oh, nice. He's playing World War II. Call of Duty. That's Call of Duty. Oh shit.
Priest. Kicking our ass. I thought they did a pretty good job in the movie making this scene between Liu Kang and Kung Lao.
Home or whatever it's called.
Yeah.
Portal? They call it Portal.
No, look at me.
Nighttime shot, right?
Not today.
Oh, that's fair.
No, you're good.
They can do Ockham. Damn! Oh shit. I can't grab him in the air. Nice! Burned him. Alright, give me a second. Alright. Lord Raiden, if you are who you say you are, then put this fork in an outlet. Electricity shouldn't bother you. NetherRealm needs to go back to making games like this, dude. Yeah, for real. I mean, I think that was like straight up midway. I don't know if they had full control at that point, but yeah, I would want another one. Yeah, we're 15.5% done.
So not 50.
No, I said 15. Did you thought I said 50? No, no.
Bro.
That'd be crazy. It was, but still. Yeah. I agree. I would also like another one of these. Honestly, remaster this or fucking bring us Fire and Ice. Outsource again, fuck it. Or they could like another compilation, because we got the classic collection that ends at like the Game Boy Advance versions of Deadly Alliance. Give us a remaster of Deadly Alliance, Deception, and then Armageddon, and then this.
And they'll charge us $300.
For 4 PS2 games?
$50 a piece.
Oh, it is WB running it now. It really is kind of cool seeing all these. Oh, damn.
Yeah, the cool.
I got my new combo.
Oh, I forgot that I got one too. I like people that come to me now. I got it up there. It's insane.
Oh, you sure you're trying to do a fatality?
Yeah. Okay. Oh, look at this fridge.
I'm getting them on sale for under $4. And those dudes never shut the fuck up, do they? What? Oh shit, we're going to was it Haunted Forest?
In forest?
Which one?
The
Yeah. Trees. Yeah,
I was right. Shit. Okay.
I want to throw people into the tree mouths.
I did win a trivia at Frank's party.
Filled with evil.
Oh, wasn't it like a tie or something?
Filled with
No,
evil
I
energy.
won.
Did I get second? No, because I remember I
Cut
thought,
me out of a win.
I thought he did pretty well too. We can't do it.
Wasn't it a tie?
No, I'm trying to remember.
You won.
Because I remember we had to fight. Didn't we decide?
Oh, that
Yeah.
was
that
was a different. That was the holiday party.
that wasn't the same. Oh,
No.
that wasn't the same thing.
No, that was a Christmas party.
That's right. That was when
And-
Brittany revealed she was pregnant.
Yeah. I beat you that time too.
It was a tie thing, baby.
That's what happened.
Yeah.
Where there was a tie. Was that MK1 or was that a MK11?
11.
Yeah.
Like the. Yeah, certainly was the next. I think it was 11. Stop blocking. They're blocking the fatalities.
Are they really?
Yeah. Can't grab them. I can't fucking fatality them. You guys. Nice. That's like a nice kick to turn them into fucking meat, you know? Man. Remember our tackle landing? Fuck out of here. Fuck out of here.
Throw his ass off the. Okay.
Well, no, that's where we went. We can't go in there. We have to go to a different one. Oh, you want to go down there? You tried porn parody marital combat? No, I've not. Oh, Krabby, how you doing, man? Krabby trap? Oh, different trap.
Trap. Whipper.
I did there's some mortality as they call them.
When to lock us?
Yeah. We didn't lock him yet. We have to lock him. Maybe we get that at 20%. You want to? It would be muddle comeback. No, that's okay. Oh shit. Dude, the Liu Kang Kung Lao fight in the 2 was like, it was good. It might be. I think that's the best fight in the movie. Yeah. Come on, Cletus.
These guys really do not like me.
Hey, you shit on me.
We shit on you. Math.
That's right. That was this one. I just saw the second movie of Carl Urban. Yeah, it was pretty good, wasn't it? I liked it. I would watch again. Would buy Blu-ray. This is where we go.
I think I saw it's already coming out stream.
Like on Max or to like rent?
No, it'll probably be on this first. Well, I don't know actually, because it is like Warner stuff goes to HBO, right? Oh, that was one better. That guy.
You can fatality these guys.
Kind of difficult.
These guys on the other hand.
Prime.
Careful, Jay's in the chat. If you say you like MK movie, he'll start putting on your opinion. That's true. That's like 90% of all game companies. Wait, what? I still haven't seen the MK2 movie. Oh, dude, it's pretty good. I won't say any spoilers, but you'll like it. Rip and die. Spoilers, people die. Guys already did, but it's no biggie.
Wasn't gonna say it, but Liu Kang is in the movie.
I mean, I don't think we spoiled anything. It's in the trailer that they fight. I spoiled. I think I spoiled anything. Ball jump. God damn it! Need a yellow arrow.
We gotta do this thing.
Well, we can't do it.
Oh.
Well, a Kombat movie. It's not Game of Thrones. Can you really spoil a Mortal Kombat movie? I mean, technically, yeah.
Only a warrior with enough to
Damn, it's like you suck. You can't do any of this yet.
If I went in knowing who died, I'd be a little frustrated. Ability. All right, yeah, we can't do it. We can't do shit.
We can't. This whole area. Bummer.
It's like padding. How's the chair treating you?
It keeps unlocking, and then I'm like, ugh.
Yeah, that's part of why I started using this one instead. Because Frank gave me this one and then the blue chair, but the blue one was kind of broken. And then I got this one from a neighbor that was moving.
Mm.
And then I used that until I got this.
It's weird that you like put a hole in the middle of it.
I didn't. Just that's funny. Yeah, we'll find out where to go eventually. We just have to keep testing these portals, I guess.
God, I'm getting aggressive with the thunder and lightning.
Thunder. I just do this because it's technically quicker, I think. Can you get more experience from the chair?
Yeah.
Remember, every hole is an entrance. Yeah, I don't think you can do it. I can't grab him and shove him. That's all we got. Actually, I thought I can use this. Can I buy it? Oh, I didn't. I got a combo instead. And they can teleport too, so it's like hardwood.
Yeah.
Thanks. Sucks. Did both of those on this end. I don't think we tried this one. Ball jump. Oh, did we try this one? I know we did this one. Get over there. Oh yeah, yeah, We tried this
we went
one.
down, yeah.
And
We're
then
gonna go up now.
Did we?
We haven't gone up here.
That map is essential. Oh, nice. Get off of fatality at some point. How many times do you think they looped the when you punch? One. It's the same fucking
sample.
Oh, did you ever get that TV Game Boy Color sound delivery?
Oh yeah, I gotta send it to you.
I think it looks cool. I'll add it in my stream somehow. Make it my alert sound. It's so satisfying. It's like that, and then the fucking Samsung dishwasher, not dishwasher, the washing machine chime. Damn.
He's efficient. He's
more. Yeah, they're more.
I think you're dead.
Oh, oh. Alright, let's hope for the best. Evil Monastery? Yeah, this is new. Dude, I have to buy a Switch 2. Fuck. Yeah, because you want Ocarina of Time remake? Is that why? Ooh. Very nice. Yes, you know me.
You do that. Too?
Yeah, I told Don I'll buy his. He's just waiting for me to finish my car payments. August. I'll have one by the end of the summer, dude. Yeah.
I believe your presence here is still a mystery.
My favorite Zelda game ever. I never finished it. I've only ever finished
There is an
the original Minish Cap.
Her name is Kitana.
Kitana?
She is a native of Outworld.
You ever been Katana? Oh, Katana's
Against those who threaten Earth.
in the second game. I forgot about that.
Comes from this place.
Sonya's the only girl in the first one.
This realm
Yeah.
is not always as you see it now. It was
Yeah,
once
I
a
mean,
place of indescribable beauty and purity. This world was corrupted by secret evil.
But yeah, no, I think
alliances.
Ocarina of Time is most people's favorite.
What happened to you? You must guard your heart, sometimes even from your allies.
Nah, man. Got them D's. Double D's. Oh.
The way they like run down the stairs. That's good. 80s. I'd say like 80s villain, like ninjas. Yeah.
Just your
Alright. Hold please.
Me? Oh. It's funny. Because it's on my side. Oh, let's go.
Stop stealing my thunder.
Us.
We're the Shaolin monks, okay?
Shaolin.
Gone.
You fucking knocked him on the top floor. Oh, they're gonna kill us. Like,
Got it.
you hit it?
Yeah, I did that. Then with the wah.
Oh yeah, I can jump on motherfuckers. Let me do that. Oh, that's not.
In the road.
I know eventually we get ones that can pick a group of people out. That can't come soon enough.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's what the mortality is. Nice. It's the Beast Alley one.
I don't think I've done this one yet.
Oh shit! Look at that.
Very Jax
I was
fatality.
gonna say, even though I hated Reiko in that movie, that fatality was cool.
Yeah.
I need to see if he has any speaking lines. He does. It's like 2.
Like, hey, we need you to say these two.
Like he's not a dumb villain. He's
In the games, like they make him out to be a lot harder.
I want Havoc. I think we'll get Havoc. I'll do like all cool like Havoc and shit.
Oh, Havoc looks sick.
Or it won't happen, but I also want Zombie Lou. I remember being like actually upset when he died in Deadly Lines, but when he came back as a zombie, I was like, ooh, this is awesome. Like the cool gun war chains.
Yeah.
Wait, I think it's a
Can't interact with this. We just go up.
did, but it didn't look like there was anything else up here.
No.
We press. Long jump. Leave? What did we do? Actually, you did pull that lever. What did that lever do? Oh, do we have to log onto these?
Like blood sacrifices.
I think that's what it is. It's really hard to be precise with throw.
Okay. I think they have to get thrown on there.
I don't know anymore. They from the second level and then
Like an uppercut.
oh shit. Okay,
There we go.
Yeah. Alright, you're on fucking spike duty.
I'm uppercut. Bring me another body, please. Turn. Grinder.
Probably down here. Oh, there's one. Let's go there. Alright, just an uppercut, that's all you did?
Yeah. His uppercut kind of gets more of like a pop out, but I think it's okay. Almost. That's so close. It is kind of hard to like.
Nice.
Yeah. Oh my god, come on. There we go.
Nice. Right? That shit was dope, lol. What was dope exactly? Sorry, but I missed, Are you talking about the spike thing? Uppercut? You didn't block on.
And block.
Yeah. Probably open that door before we go. Astro. Good. Zombie Liu Kang from After Deception. Yeah, with like I said, the chains. And he kind of does that thing that Havoc does later on, where it's like his body will move, then his head will spin back around. He's like, ah.
Yes, follow me. Follow me to damnation.
Exceptions when we get like Shredder Sub-Zero, right?
Yeah, because before that they had. I'm not really a big fan of Unmasked, you know? But the ice arms. I mean, the ice arms are cool. Shredder had that one too. But yeah, that was exceptional. Like top 3 looks of Zero. Oh yeah. It's fun to play as him. Yeah, it was. Honestly, after Onimusha, because that's my next like little marathon I might do. I kind of want to do. Let's see what happens after I finish the campaigns of 9, 10, 11, 1. Because I want to play like the movie mode on stream. Oh, I might go back to the PS2 era games, assuming the discs fucking work. What is this? Oh yeah.
Waving wagon.
I think I'm put over. Who's this? Wait, I'm flaming I will. He was so good in that role.
I think Tropic Thunder and Hot Rod are my 2, like, can watch those nonstop.
They are top tier comedies. I can die.
Oh shit, it's done. Time to put on Annihilation.
I don't have it.
What? You don't have Annihilation? You need it just for the meme?
I can put DVD on.
Not the same. It's like stuck in the stairs.
Oh yeah, we can.
Stay over it.
Damn, no, I can put Dream Warriors on.
An adjacent horror.
Dead. Night of the Living Dead. Fucking Demolition Man.
We gotta get you a copy of Annihilation.
Yeah. Honestly, that one did grow on me. It gets fucking dumb.
Oh, here we go. I can get the bicycle.
There you go. I want to hear it. Okay, dragging these notes across your chin. Nice. Yeah. If you're talking hot rods, we have to bring up Popstar. Popstar's awesome too.
Yeah.
Doink, doink. We did it.
Bin Laden came on my Spotify earlier.
Fucking let me fuck Bin Laden. Whoa, that girl is a freak. Fucked harder than when the U.S. government fucked Bin Laden.
The music video is so good.
It's on fucking Twitter.
Weird, yeah.
The line was like something that's a no-no. And I came in there like tilting 6 and like
Yeah.
and he's like going prone,
Yeah.
fucking night vision. Fuck. I was too busy like remembering and flashing back to the music video. I forgot my phone for a second. So many times. That's a good movie. Or they're making fun of Macklemore. He's like, I'm not gay. If I was, I would fight for equal rights. And he just like keeps doing that, but he just goes so like, I'm not gay. Predator, monster trucks, beer, titties. Wolf's got the seal. Oh yeah. Probably fatality. I'm not doing too hot.
This is the boom boom. It's like,
oh yeah.
This reminds me of the scene in Ferris Bueller where he's just like slow-mo jumping on the trampoline.
Oh, Jigger. I like the part.
You know what I'm talking about? Oh my god, I'm getting tagged.
Didn't just even survive. Didn't hurt a little. I'm having a good time with this. Oh shit.
Sorry.
You good. Color high. Oh, right there. I can't reach it though. I have no depth perception. Okay, I was like, where the fuck is tell? Yeah, walk. It's very central. It opens up then to attack too.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Long neck.
Piece of shit and rabbit. Don't tell Peter. It does help. I'll say I might just do. That's good. Well, weaponry may be the man I am today.
Still don't quite understand the bicycle kick like controls. Like folder?
The controls aren't very intuitive. Once you get the hang of it. Oh shit, combo you did. Wait, let's just keep going and fighting her. What's happening? We might actually have to keep going.
Just keep pushing through.
Can't really tell us this.
We're kind of dead.
Oh.
Who is that?
Oh no, I guess we gotta it's like a boss maybe. Ah!
Oh
fuck?
no!
What the fuck?
Secret level.
You died! Off the map? Falling off the map. Kung Lao pulls rabbit out of hat. My freak! Nice. I'm hoping it just like ends. To back to a checkpoint.
The map, bro.
In the nether realm now.
What is?
What the
Wait,
fuck?
are you? We can. Okay, so we can have the map pop up,
We can keep fighting.
dude.
Whoa. Oh yeah, nice.
Are we gonna? I think we're probably gonna have to exit out.
Oh, look how much experience I have though. Daniel. Sorry, man. It's okay. It happens. You're fucked. I was hoping it would just like off the map and kill us, you know? How far back was that? I think we have to do like the spike shit again.
I'm gonna lose my bicycle kick.
You might actually. No!
Beginning of the game, like, all right, I'm out.
It didn't save. It's corrupted. I'm not sorry. That's what you deserve for playing illegally emulated games. Well, my legally obtained game didn't work. So... well, I stole it. Oh, not versus. Who do we got here though? There's like
Oh, there's a bunch of people.
Baraka, I think that's Katana, probably Reptile,
Reptile.
and Sub-Zero, and a Scorpion.
And
And
that'd be Johnny.
yeah. Oh yeah, that's probably Johnny right there. What's versus mode? Too late, I call SWAT. No! Versus mode kind of sucks. It's like that, like the combat we're doing, but against each other. It's not really built for it. But they added it. Probably was like a last minute thing. They're like, guys, we need more combat.
Whooshi? No.
To see.
Bro, no.
Yeah.
Back to the academy?
Well, hopefully not the. Hopefully it's like right before. No, didn't we save in fucking Outworld? Maybe not.
Oh my.
Oh, it's right before we enter though. But still, they're at the beginning of this.
That's like a solid 40 minutes.
Dude, if you want, we can
All magic
Brutal.
pick it up later, or
We must be cautious.
But isn't this Shang Tsung's magic?
I'm down and keep going if you are.
Trust his warnings.
I know how Shang Tsung thinks. I will not have as much power in Outworld. But here, I have the power to make the way safe.
Yeah, that sucks. I would skip it. At least we know what portal to go to now. We can just skip all that other bullshit. I know. That does suck. Back to school, motherfuckers. That's where you last save? Yeah. I guess we didn't encounter one here. Not even so far.
That's speedrun this shit.
Yeah. You're fucking spongy. I'm glad we're playing some normal.
Are you able to like throw them?
Dude, I can't grab them at all. I've been trying this entire time.
That's what's annoying is you have to sit here and beat their ass.
We can't even do a fatality on them.
Do that, dude. Punch him from both sides.
We're doing better though. And it was over here actually. Is it this one? We went up.
Oh, there we go. Just fucking push him off.
Easy. Whoa, whoa,
Oh,
whoa,
the
whoa.
portal sucked him.
I think this was it. Right? Not even monastery here. The one thing about this game, when you stop playing, then you hop back on the game, you'll like what were we doing? Where did we go? Yeah. That was a mouthful. I
Come, mortals.
don't want to skip it.
Princess of Outworld and die.
I can skip it now.
You got too far away.
Oh. Lever. Yeah, that's totally. Yeah, you said like 80s and you see it. It was like ninjas coming through the apartment or something. Wow.
Test your might.
I'm retarded. You can't say that. I'm actually glad that word's back. It's funny. Actually, I forgot that I put J there. Of Scott Bakula.
Let's like go up here.
I don't think we can. We have to go down and
Might be the guys.
Yeah. There we go. I wait for it to get close. Nice. Alright. Yeah, you're better for this one. Try this, but I don't think it's the same. Reloy Spankins? Wait, I know that name. Are you one of my Grandy of Ruth? Reloy? When they're playing Resident Evil. Welcome in, Reloy. Thank you for the redeem. Damn!
Out you go.
Alright, now we can go upstairs. Yeah, we are speedrunning this.
Well, it's like half the game you're trying to figure out what you're supposed to do in the level, and you're like,
So experience too. It sucked. I had like 12,000. Oh yeah.
okay.
When did you get it last time? Is it a quick one? That's a good one. That's like your bait one too. Ads. Yeah, I can see when you're an ad. By the way. There we go. Bitch.
You got that.
Yeah, I think this is where we were at, actually.
Damn, we just suck.
Half hour took us like 5 minutes.
Well, you don't know when to like. You have to like actually beat up a bunch of enemies, or you just need to keep pushing through.
We have to follow her. Is where to go? This way. Oh, there's a bit more. That one. Those are fun. I like those. You haven't used those yet, huh? Crushing it. Bro, there's a fucking mummy in this game. LMFAO. There.
Ermac?
Oh,
I don't know.
Rick is kind of a mummy, actually. With the
He's like
bandages and
bandaged,
shit.
yeah.
I don't really thought about it that way. Once again, I think I prefer it to like just the regular look to it, but you know. But yeah, these ones I actually don't know.
Did we have to push through this, or was this something where we had to like beat them all up?
That's so much experience.
We're actually locked in. We're like getting quiet. Like, fucking god.
That's funny. Yeah. Oh, nice. Oh, I'm gonna pick him up. Oh yeah. Oh shit. That one.
He did not fall through the patches.
Yeah, because they did a fatality and then we fell through, right? Okay, I'm scared. It's gonna look kind of buggy.
Google. Ooh, I haven't done this one.
Oh shit. Oh yeah. What's this called?
Bone breaker. Oh shit.
Oh, I might have done head toss. Oh shit. going or something. Hard to tell that. Okay.
Sit up here.
Okay.
Wait, am I getting over here? Hold on. I get my. Oh, yo.
You know what would help your game? More yogurt. Yogurt. I don't get it. Like a protein and calcium drip.
You know they were supposed to keep fighting?
I don't know. Didn't watch the yogurt meal after Nancy White sent you on Discord out of here. No.
Yeah, just like spun all the way.
I got rid of these guys. Hopefully that's it. I hope to die. Why don't you just die already? One right there.
We're done here.
Don't go in there yet. Honestly, I think I saw maybe a path this way. Oh, okay, he scared me. Lever, can we interact? Punch him. Yeah. Does the map say? Fuck. Maybe we go back. That one room. I thought the game was linear. As we were playing Resident Evil. Oh, this key. There's special anything they can land on. Oh, on all of these this time, I think. Let's do the... Oh, no. Yeah, that's what it is. It's the same thing that we did before with Carter.
Wait, what happened?
Put them all on these, I think, right?
On the spikes?
I think so. You know what I mean? Because that's where we went.
Yeah.
But they disappear after a while. Fun is.
Oh.
Oh. Day.
Okay, so there's gotta be something with these guys.
You like a certain amount of them? I don't know.
Maybe like in the middle?
There's also bodies right here. Maybe these two. These right here. Maybe these two.
Remember, enemies can be used to help you progress.
Oh, I see like the skeleton.
Yeah,
kind of thing.
maybe these two.
I cannot reach the ledge with those
Yeah, that makes sense.
And then that's where the key is.
Yeah, okay.
So I learn them over here and then we'll do it. Now we have to we'll do it over here, I think.
Yeah.
I don't let them come to us, I think. That works too. That was
And then I
was
throw it this way.
Right back.
Okay, let me see.
Oh, fuck. I tried to do my special.
Check.
Button. Yeah, that's these specific. That's okay. We can do it.
I cannot reach the ledge with those spikes in the way.
Remember, enemies can be used to help you progress.
Don't say. Oh shit.
Nice. That one.
I threw the other guy out. I wish I gave you more to work with.
Yeah.
The two.
I cannot reach the ledge with those spikes in the way.
Huh.
Ow. That one.
Actually, no, it's one next to it. I think it's this one and then this one. Good job. Like that one and then this one. Too. That's actually really tough.
Like very precise.
But I do that. This one does do it, so I want to try.
I cannot reach the ledge with those spikes in the way.
Let me go over here. Block. Yeah, sorry, the chair's not great. The block. No. No. Okay, maybe. Actually, I don't know. What's that one? Oh, fucker. Dude, this sucks.
The timing of it is also hard because they disappear after.
All right, how about you do one and then I'll do one.
Progress.
I cannot reach the ledge with those spikes in the way.
I don't like it. Don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. Ow. Yeah. Fuck, I'm not sure if I don't know. Maybe they both have to be like on that side. We have to be quick with it too, because they disappear.
I was saying like they're
It fucking blows, or maybe they just both have to be on at the same time. It's two, maybe. I'm about to look it up. You do
I
it.
cannot reach the ledge with those spikes in the way.
Watch to be completely wrong. Let's wait for both of them to get close, and maybe.
oh my god. Well, let's just throw this guy over the quick. I jump on his corpse and go up there.
Oh, dude! Oh, bro! Does that help over here?
That's why you hire me. Okay. Got any secrets for me?
Go! God, part. At least get to a save point. It'd be nice to not have to do this again.
Seriously.
How high up does this thing go?
Oh, hi. Almost. Oh, nice. Come on, Joe. Little thingy does. Ow. Damn.
Yeah, those guys hit hard.
You have to block. Oh. You know what's funny? We're probably at the bottom. good. But
Wait, it just gave us
actually,
a tip for the mutality. Can we do it?
How high up does this
we
thing
can
go?
try.
Because it gave us like a partial thing for it.
We have to buy it.
Oh, beefy.
Oh yeah, we do have these.
Oh.
What was the tip on? I saw Sub-Zero or something.
Yeah. Or something.
I think we have to put them on the thing again.
Put one more.
Mikey's right here.
Oh.
I'm just gonna aim that. Look at this be like actual control.
Oh my god, I almost had him.
Like buying blood now. Kind of cool.
Oh, shit. Come on. It doesn't do it.
Now we can try it up here. Oh. I think that actually unlocked that, maybe. My fucking hat back. We're gonna come back for it to throw it. Dude, it's like the same like naps. That's
Yeah.
cool. Oh yeah, I gotta put it in mute.
Try to keep up, mortal. Do not
Try. Oh, sorry.
your own
My bad.
view.
How dare you?
Baywatch.
Oh. Mentality.
Mortality
Yeah.
obtained. You now have the power to kill multiple enemies at one time. You must perform immortality to progress.
Damn, fumble. My turn.
Wait, what? Maybe you have to do a specific one? Makes no sense. It's fucking bug.
Perform something I won't allow you to perform.
Oh, we're taking too long, maybe. What the fuck? Makes no sense.
Wait. So. I'm there.
Maybe it's an anti-piracy thing. Shaolin monks can't do mortality. Oh, we have to fill up 2 dots.
Oh.
Oh, I didn't realize it was like, okay, yeah, we have to keep going. We're not full. We probably could have ended it. Cover me. That makes sense.
You must
Yeah, we know. Now we can do it. Wanna do Oh, it's me.
Oh, he's real.
The music was so handy.
Mortality. Check your journal for known mortalities.
She's at the top of the tower.
You can be behind. Proud of us for doing that. Oh, yeah, that was a big moment. You almost do yours. No, almost. Don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. Okay, so I do it. They get to save right here, too. Yeah, you can do it. See this one. Ooh. That's cool.
Give me that clear. Explode.
A statue filled with evil energy blocks your path. You will need.
There's so much shit that we don't have to like do some stuff.
That's annoying. Ah, nice. Excellent. Oh shit. One? Oh, here we go. That's pretty cool. So dig these guys out. They're gonna just immune to fatality and shit.
Yeah, I feel like manually beat the rats.
Ed.
Those guys are actually good to like adjust.
They're learning. Fuck. Alright, we're figuring that out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just juggle those guys.
There you go. Oh, you bitch.
Finally.
Oh! Oh! Needed that.
The moment.
Yeah. I'll save. I picked up the actual PS2 controller. That's right, save like a good boy. Nice. Nice, let's save again. Why? Because Stone Cold said so. Better to do. Let me, oh yeah, I can shop for some shit now. Pose. Auto launcher. Oh, I don't have to buy these in order either. Go under. Oh, I never actually got this one. Like, glitch out of the map all you want. That was so annoying when that happened. Air. Oh. Hell yeah. Alright. I was leveling up.
Oh, did you buy something?
I bought a lot of shit.
Let me buy some shit. I ain't got no money. Ooh, what's this?
Two and then triangle.
I'm not ever using these.
I keep using it by accident. Because you see me when I'm on top of them, it's like...
Ah. There's definitely stuff I'm not thinking of.
Yeah, like I got more combos. Like I got more divine kicks. So actually, I think I can spam my divine kicks more than I already was.
Now I try katana.
Built like
You're beautiful.
Jenna
Who
Jameson.
are you?
The loyal daughter of Shao
Oh,
Kahn,
Raiden's
the
town.
eternal emperor of Outworld.
I'm fighting for Earthrealm.
Enemies of this realm,
You guys are my chosen champions.
Computer, tell katana.
Computer, show me the new code for Katana or Shaolin monks. Computer, show me Katana's big juicy boobies.
I can get a little juggle for a second. She's she did not get up.
Stop you. You okay? Announcer's like, fatality?
KO. I'm gonna straight up juggle.
Computer, unlock booby physics. And looked at that ass and said, "You're beautiful." She's getting double teamed and railed.
over, mortal.
Why is she walking away like a goblin?
Very graceful. Itchy, very befitting of a
You must release her from
Princess.
princess of Edenia. What's an Eternia?
Your turn. I have the power.
Fucking. Well, it saves right before the boss. Hopefully, it saves now. I think we're in a new area. Oh, that's landing. Whoa! Getting Katana started off in 2.
Wow.
Uh-oh. I was gonna get the gimmick here. That's... You're gonna save her now? Bitch, we were just fighting.
I don't remember. Oh, I don't remember this part of the game at all. Yeah, we're gonna have to fight all 3 of them. 2 of them.
We got Black Jade too. She's getting races like.
Both sides are crazy. Pitchforks.
Oh dang. 3 versus 2?
That's what I was thinking. Yeah.
Ooh. Just play the Charlie's Angels theme.
Oh, straight into it.
Place her in the device. Be careful of the outworld assassins. If given the chance, they will attempt to free her.
Okay. You're in the device.
So we have to like
Knock her in.
into the dragon and then paint her?
I'm not entirely sure.
So we need to focus our efforts on her. But
Oh, there's also
we do have health, so I'm like,
Dude, slow the game down.
this is going fast. Oh my god. Dude, it's honestly very
Overwhelming.
playing Smash Bros. Right now.
Yeah, a little bit.
Ow.
Nice, it worked. Alright, fuck off, bitches. Now stun up there.
Do we have to roll like get something?
I think we have to hit oh, okay, yeah, we just have to make sure they didn't clear spell time.
Oh.
Stop it! Oh shit, that's my fault. Thank you. Losing track, there's so much shit going on. Dude.
You haven't beaten me yet.
Have I?
Alright,
Nice.
wasn't that bad.
Dude.
Like we weren't just kicking her ass. Was she under a spell? Yes, was she
Will not let me go without a fight.
mind controlled?
Defeat the outworld assassins. Some of the traps around the arena may be of use.
What's he got? Hardly up. I love the move. I like all the traps we've been talking about.
Dude, I can literally just sit here and juggle. Oh, there.
Oh, we're too. Nice.
Got her.
Oh,
Wait, what are we doing?
it just helps keep it like one at a time.
We got him? Yes.
It's fun.
Trying to get her in half again. It's not.
The thrower, I think, for uppercut too. Let's see. Teleport to you, bitch.
Dude, this is.
Ah, shit. That's kind of cool though.
Get in there!
Thank you for the redeem, Jay. Damn it. That was Jay. Have fun. Baby, I'm going to bed. Alright, peace out, Jay. You're hanging out. Four?
Kind of like a fire be.
It kind of does. Oh, it is. It is. It's one of my reviews.
Okay.
I'm so in the zone. I was like, I think I heard him. I'm black, so it's like I'm not. What are you talking about? What are you talking about? He's cycling low. I fucking love that spam in the air.
Okay, she's done, so now we focus our attention. Okay. Oh, wow, it wanted me to kill her?
He'll be back. Maybe just a quick finisher.
Now she gets to die.
Dang, Jay. Nice. Get the Kenshi treatment. Sorry, I killed your bodyguard.
Here, let me help you.
Thank you. Who
Still my
are
best
you?
friend, dude.
I am Liu Kang. I come from Earthrealm. This is Kung Lao. We are here to stop Shang Tsung from attacking Earth.
Shang Tsung? It is not Shang Tsung that wants Earth.
Not Shang Tsung?
Damn, it stinks.
You better take a look at this.
Oh.
One of them is dead. The other is only stunned.
But her teeth, though.
Jay?
Very scary.
You
Oh.
He's dead.
She was my best friend and you killed her.
Sorry.
See, what happened was.
Don't touch me.
Probably been vital information for you to yell at us.
For killing Jade.
She tried to kill us. I am sorry. You were under a spell of some sort. You were trying to kill us.
I get bad news, I'm gonna do that.
How did I get here?
Now you gotta
This
do
one
that.
can explain. Do not look under the veil.
Ain't no bar fight. I'm just like, get back.
Explain yourself.
Get the fuck
Jade
back.
was my Kitana's best friend until Jade was forced by Shao Kahn to hunt her
Wait, she
down
does, you see
and
it.
bring her back to him. We were given a spell to control her.
Shao Kahn. Isn't that your father?
I do not
That
blame you for
that
this.
make you
Jade.
shout cunt?
I blame the man that forces me to call him father. The one who killed my true father and stole his throne. I blame Shao Kahn for what he did to my mother.
What is
Oh,
it?
Sindel up in this bitch
I'm
too?
remembering a lot now.
She's a MK3 character.
Who?
Reptile.
Yeah, Sindel's
If Melina is
free.
here, so is Reptile.
They might introduce her in here though.
I am certain that they have both been charged with hunting.
Alright, we killed Jade. Just rotting on the floor over there.
Dicks. Oh. Dude, those are swords.
Right?
I
I forget
cannot
Eddie,
let her
dude.
escape.
Like Langelos.
There is more to
Yeah,
this than we
dude.
know.
Raiden would tell us if there was.
You need to think more about what is happening and less about this girl you just rescued.
Oh, yeah, I put Ninja Turtles on, by the way. Fitting for the size. Yeah, talk about thighs. What is it? I like this. Boy, what is it? New?
Team
I don't
up.
know. Poster of that.
You have obtained the
Actually, I think I do.
ruin. Powerful attacks
I'll go get it. What's a magazine ad that I have?
Yes.
Oh, we found the fucking Fist of Ruin.
Like Pokemon, you can finally break through boulders now.
Hey, pick that fucking bitch ass Snorlax up. What's experience? Oh, I wasn't sure that would work.
Wait for me!
Come on, Lou. It's bros before hoes. Probably make it to the next save spot.
Raiden.
Hopefully.
Raiden.
Kung Lao, Liu Kang.
Yeah.
I have discovered that Shang Tsung
think after a boss
somehow
fight.
used the Elder God's magic boundaries to make Outworld vulnerable.
I do not understand.
You can weaken him by winning victories against Shang Tsung's assassins. It means that your every battle here affects Shang Tsung's power directly. You must fight
like an
until
after
one of you
image
is
happening.
victorious. It is the
Oh,
only
yeah.
way to save Earth.
We will be
Ghosting.
in competition with each other then.
Shang Tsung's power will
I
be
just want him doing
divided
this because he's
into
divine. He's a
that will
god.
make him vulnerable and incapable of attacking Earth.
Oh yeah, I see now.
Raiden.
Slightly
who's
illuminated.
Shao Kahn?
Oh, you got it
And
too.
Where's Kitana?
Or
He's
just
not
whatever
to be
engine.
concerned with. Kitana is still regaining her memory and trying to understand the effects of the magic she
I discovered
was
Shang Tsung's actually a cool guy. You should give him a soul.
Concern yourselves with saving Earthrealm. Through the portals, you will find more battles, more ways to weaken Shang Tsung.
Those big toe shoes are so uncomfortable.
Yeah, they are.
That and like like the sandals with like the little G-string going through your toe. I hate that thing, man.
Flossing.
Yeah, I remember I got some in middle school because I thought they looked cool. Like, oh, look at that. These are style. I was like, no, these are fucking uncomfortable. Wait, are we supposed? Probably. Now we can watch us backtrack all the way to the beginning.
Or I don't know if we need it.
Want to go back in?
Yeah, I'll do it.
Oh, you're right. I thought maybe we could. Damn this game. Give me yellow paint and an arrow, please. Be an objective on the map.
Give me arrows.
See that?
Like you do have to jump there.
Yeah, dude. Fuck you, game.
Yeah, you're just like take a
Yes. Now we need to know to come this way. Backtracking. The whole time he's posing as Raiden, he should just keep talking himself up and try to do a Stockholm syndrome and gaslight them. Hey guys, actually, on second thought, Shang Tsung is probably the good guy. Yeah, it's gonna record through.
Nice.
Well, shit, it's an hour and a half. Well, given I guess an extra hour and a half has been us figuring out where the fuck to go.
Well, this will be like a 4 session, maybe 3.
Maybe 3. Like I think no more than 4.
Yeah.
But
nice.
Call it here.
Yeah.
3-hour stream. I'm back. Got a new setup. Be cool. So I'm probably gonna stream. Oh, actually, I'm hanging with Dontre tomorrow. Yeah, I'm probably not streaming tomorrow, but I like this. I'm excited for more of this. So, everybody, thank you for tuning in. Let me see who's live. Make it more graded. All right. Grade. Lisa, Brad is playing Majora's Mask. Like cosplays. Oh, she's playing Direct to Baby. We're gonna raid Bree. I have to do an OBS. Missed everything. Do it. Have a good one, man. 4-hour stream. You leaving? What? What did I miss? Oh yeah, you missed everything. Full 1 remake. All I have are like thirst trap fucking streamers I can raid. Oh, let's do Bradtastic. He's our New Zealand thirst trap. Joey, what did I do? Wait, are you streaming, Bloody? No, you're not streaming. Well, you stayed in here the whole time. No. Alright, we're gonna rate him. He's like actually ending streaming soon, so it's like he's gonna quit. He's quitting streaming, so let's give him a raid while we still can. But all you motherfuckers have a good night. I will see you soon. Not sure when exactly. Where did OBS go? Funny. Oh, here we go. All right, bye everybody. Have a good one. Say bye to chat.
Later, dudes.
All right, bye.